So let's get started. Thanks very much, people, for coming and joining this session. I'm conscious the world's changed a little bit. If you're in the UK, the world's changed a little bit over the last 3 or 4 days. If you're in other parts of Europe or even Asia Pacific, it might have changed like a week or 2 weeks ago as well. If you're in America, you're just getting started. So we're talking about HR tech, and we're talking about automation. What are the different things that you can automate? And I'm pleased to have Ben join me from Personio. Personio is a company that I came across a couple of months ago when somebody I know, Laura Schroeder, joined the business as head of marketing. And then when I started looking at the company, it was probably round about the time that the business announced a really significant investment round. And that's when I started looking at the product a bit more and thought, hold on, this is a really great business and seems to be growing really fast. And, might be a company that we're interested in potentially partnering with. So Ben and I got talking, and then we realized actually we've got a lot of subjects in common around the theme of automation. So Ben, welcome. Give us a quick introduction. Just tell us a bit about you. Tell us about what's your CV?
Cool, yeah, more than happy to. So I'm the head of international, probably worth starting with my role currently at Personio. I'm the head of international. As you mentioned, we're a HR management system, which covers everything from applicant tracking to onboarding through the entire digital employee lifecycle. We're headquartered in Germany, in Munich. So my job as international is to look after everything and look after our growth outside of Germany, which primarily for us is going to be in the UK, the Benelux, the Nordics, and in Spain as well. I've been with the company for about 7 months or so. So I've been here for a little while now, just about got my feet under the table. Feels like it's been a lot longer. A lot has been crammed into those 7 months. And previous to this, I spent 7 years working at Stack Overflow, which is, I'm sure lots of people in the recruiting space will probably be familiar with Stack Overflow. I joined them as the second person in Europe and grew out our international presence there. So I did the big growth international expansion piece, and then got to a point where I wanted to try and do the big growth international piece again from scratch. Kind of missed the early days. So very much back into the fast growth and exciting times piece. So
yeah. Okay, cool. So tell us a bit about Personio then. How old's the company? How many people are in the business? Type of customers do you work with? That kind of thing.
Certainly, yeah. So we are 4.5 years old, so still a relatively young company from that regard. We, as you mentioned, we closed a big round of funding. So we closed our Series C, which was 75 million, led by Excel.
Wow, 75 million.
Big chunk of change. A big part of that's going to be put towards international expansion. So how we grow internationally, at the moment in Germany, we have a really strong brand, but how do we make sure that everyone around Europe sees us as the leading HR management system to support companies' growth?
Yeah.
We're up to about 450 employees, I believe now. I think we're hiring about 40 people a month at the moment. So the number gets really hard to track all the time. I think it's 300 at the turn of the year. So I think we're around the 450 now. And very much on the fast growth velocity. Typically work with companies anywhere at the smaller end, probably about 20 employees, up to the bigger end, probably around the 2,000 employees, which is where we see a big part of the segment of the community is pretty underserved. There seems to be a lot of companies who work in the 1 to 100 space. There seems to be a lot in the 2,000 plus space. That small to medium size is a place where we really specialize. And we see a lot of pain from a lot of the people we speak to, where we can really try and add some value.
Yeah. Okay. Just to go back to something you said near the beginning. So Personio does talent management, and you described some of the aspects of that. So applicant tracking, onboarding, and then you use the term the full digital life cycle. Could you kind of just go into, what does that mean? What are all the different, what's the full digital life cycle? What are all the different points where an employee is touching a company and they would be touching Personio? What are the moments?
Completely, yeah. We fully believe it doesn't even start as an employee. It actually starts as a candidate, which is actually where, when I started talking to you, I was really impressed with Candidate.ID and wanted to know more, because it's a really interesting part of the journey. But for us, it literally starts as, I have no way of knowing who the company is. So it's the idea that you can advertise onto job boards directly through Personio. That obviously syncs up very nicely with what you guys are doing because you're operating a really interesting part of that space.
Yeah.
And it goes the entire way through from there to managing the interview process, to arranging interviews, to scheduling evaluation forms, to issuing contract letters, all the way through to the onboarding, so their first experience in the company, the digital employee file, so storing all of that really core information, booking a holiday, tracking your attendance, storing those really boring parts that you need to store in a system, like certifications or doctor's notes or health and safety records, anything like that, storing it all in one centralized place. And then even through towards the payroll side, so being able to pay every employee directly through Personio, and the performance piece as well, which is obviously to make sure that you're not just trying to attract the best talent, but you're actually trying to retain it once you have it as well, and continues to improve them as they go along.
So when you used the word full, when you said full digital lifecycle, yeah, you've just listed a pretty comprehensive set of things that I would expect somebody would be touching their, let's call it HR system. Okay, let's talk about HR. So my view on HR is that it's a little behind other business disciplines in terms of having automated tasks.
Yeah.
Would you agree or disagree with that? And if you and why?
Yeah, awesome statement. First of all, I completely agree. I think it's kind of why we exist as a company. So I definitely do agree that I think that more people could be doing a lot more in this space. I saw a stat recently that said that in the IT sector, about 20% of people's time is spent on administrative functions.
Yeah.
They're probably like one of the more further developed in terms of automation, I'd say IT. So it's probably around 20, maybe a bit lower. There's still some admin there. There's still companies springing up, trying to streamline operations and still trying to make things even more efficient. But it's not in a bad place there.
Yep.
In HR at the moment, I think it's about 42%. So if you actually think in a working week, you're probably spending somewhere in the region of 2 full days entirely spent doing admin when you work in HR. On average, I'm sure there's some companies who are a lot better than others, but on average, it seems about 2 full days. Now that is a terrible, terrible waste, we think, in our side. We even have almost like our company mascot is somebody called the admin monster, who we almost say is the person who we're trying to defeat, is the person who we're at war with. We're trying to make sure that we can kind of like defeat this admin monster who steals all of your time and stops you from allowing to do all the really important parts of HR because you're having to do the really, really monotonous manual process. So for us, our entire reason of being around is to remove all of that so you can just concentrate on the real human part of human resources and effectively just trying to enable better organizations.
So when I was much younger, my mum was reading a book called How to Write a Screenplay in 21 Days. And I flicked through this, How to Write a Screenplay in 21 Days. And one of the rules was you have to have a protagonist, which is the person that everybody's rooting for, and you have to have an antagonist or the baddie. And it sounds like your company has produced the baddie, which is the admin monster. I think that's a great way of telling the story.
Completely, yeah. It's something that at first I was a bit confused by. Maybe I wasn't completely warm on it. Once I started to understand more about it, it's a really fun, light-hearted way of doing it. But absolutely, that is the person we're at war with. Even to there's a big recruiting event. I don't know if you know it, called Personio in Germany.
Yes.
Probably
it's been cancelled, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. I've probably done a terrible pronunciation there, by the way. So apologies to any German listeners then. But we actually had someone dress up as the admin monster, and we went to war with them. So we absolutely do see it as someone who we're very much trying to relieve the world from and make sure they don't have to worry about it.
So this is great. You've just helped me out there because for the last couple of weeks, I've been telling people in my team that I really want a mascot for Candidate.ID, and I really want a honey badger because they're quite they're really tough. They are pretty ferocious, and there's loads of different things we could do with that. But actually, a lot of people said no, they're horrible, horrible creatures. We don't want a honey badger. And now I'm realizing the honey badger could be our nemesis.
Completely, completely.
Yeah.
And that, to be honest, it's kind of light-hearted, but at the same time, that's actually why when I started talking to yourself, Adam, why I was just like, we should absolutely start doing stuff together. Because when I looked at Candidate.ID's product, was in a real similar vein. It's the idea
Yeah.
that what you're trying to do, you're trying to save the same problem that we are.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine from your side, you're seeing HR and recruiters spending way too much time on admin. Is that something you feel is fair from your side as well?
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask you about this same question back to you, but specifically around HR. What are the areas? But I'll tell you, in recruitment, I can see, first of all, the administration around actually writing and posting job descriptions.
Yeah.
Job adverts. I say job descriptions like as a synonym for job adverts, because a lot of the time that's what they just paste is their job descriptions. That's not an advert at all. There's pain around that. There's pain around actually identifying where should I be advertising. So that's a whole load of time spent on researching stuff, especially for those companies of like 200 people where they're hiring a fourth person in the finance team, and actually they've never advertised for that job before. So what are they going to do? So all of that is a problem. Actually storing things like job descriptions and like organograms and what's the company structure and the organization structure? How does everybody fit in together? So when you're recruiting, who has that information? Where is it? Where can I get my hands on it? Actually, there's often nowhere to store that so that everybody can then go and access. The next one is around candidates. Who's applied to our company in the past? Let's go and take a look at them. They might be interested in a conversation today. Do we know who's cold and who's hot in real time? We probably don't. So that's something that leads people to start the recruitment process from the beginning every single time.
Yeah.
So they'll go and spend hours on sourcing, on going through Xing or LinkedIn to try and find people, or they'll go and advertise, or they'll do both of these things, or they'll go and spend a lot of money with recruitment agencies. So the process of keeping in contact with people is really tough. It's really manual, and there's a lot of Excel still in recruitment. A lot of people. There's a lot, not just Excel, but there's a lot of analog Excel, which is my notepads, and people keep lists. I saw a poll recently which showed that over 25% of internal recruiters still run Excel lists alongside their applicant tracking systems if they have one, because they're doing things in quite an old-fashioned kind of way. So recruitment is very, very ripe for being automated. My question for you is, why do you think it is that HR disciplines are behind things like marketing and finance when it comes to really digitizing simple processes?
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. I don't think there's one main reason. I kind of feel like when there's a hard bottom line, like with return on investment, when people start talking about sales and marketing, I think that people can kind of justify a bit more when they're spending money on it. And I think that you almost probably it started being a few years ago, you started hearing the term about like the war for talent started coming around a bit more. And then I think at the same time, every single career page popped up with this idea of like, people are our biggest asset. And I think that at that stage, it was almost like, okay, this is something that we need to start caring about. I think it's only just that people are actually trying to actually focus on it and really dig into it. So I think there's probably been a shift in the last 3 or 4 years where more and more people are starting to pay attention to it. I think it's just catching up from probably like years of neglect, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And when you start looking at the typical path of HR, I think that HR was actually viewed very differently in some companies. Like if you think about a marketing person or a head of IT or even a head of sales, there's a very good chance they'd have been sat in board meetings. There's a very good chance they'd be at that top level. I think that HR's definitely caught up. I think historically HR was typically an office manager who then ended up picking up a bit more responsibility.
That's right.
Then it was a case of like, hey, can you do the recruitment as well? We need some help there. So they started doing a bit more recruitment, and then it's only now probably the more successful companies are seeing HR in a very different way. I think their actual job has moved away from doing like pushing paper and kind of like trying to do some manual stuff. I think their job has changed to now like, hey, you're part of the strategic planning. You're involved in looking at like how we should staff our entire organization, like what the hierarchy should look like. Like looking at things like, do we have gender pay gaps? Like all of these things that are really, really important. I don't think that HR historically ever had a focus on, and now it's just becoming more and more important. So I don't think it was ever done with malice. I think it was just almost negligence more than anything else. I don't know. What do you think? I'm sure you've got some good opinions on this one, Adam.
Yeah, no, I do, and I don't disagree with what you just said, but I also do wonder whether, because HR is one of the less technical sort of mainstream business disciplines, and if you think about people who are left-brained and people who are right-brained, and the left-brained people are all mathematicians and software engineers and engineers and things like that, and the right-brain people are often in things like sales and marketing and HR and those kinds of areas. I wonder whether there's just been a bit more of a sense of HR is a people thing, and so time talking to each other more so than automating tasks is something that they've just more gravitated towards. There's also definitely been something about money and the amount of investment that has gone into HR. So HR technology received very, very little in the way of investment until perhaps 5-6 years ago, when there started becoming a lot more money. So, it's not uncommon to see HR tech companies like Personio going, there's another investment around 75 million. But 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, that wasn't happening very much. Whereas in fintech and martech and health tech and even ed tech, it was happening a lot more back then. So I think that has been the availability of technologies and services is something that has not happened as fast in HR.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that if you look at some of the other industries, their growth has probably been drawn out over a much longer period of time. I almost feel like HR tech in particular has learned to walk and now is running all in the space of about 5 years. Like it's kind of like the time period to catch up is really condensed.
Yeah,
I think that's probably why there's so much investment going into it. Because I think everyone can see the problem, right? Yeah. Everyone can see the exact same problem. And you talk to so many companies out there and so many people who work in HR. And even with all of this automation or so many people trying to fix it, there's still this real problem that people are finding that there's still not enough there. We still haven't digitalized enough in HR. Yeah. There's still so much more that we can do going in this direction. So even now, I don't think that we're anywhere near like uncovering the entire HR automation piece. I think there's so much more to come. But I think that obviously companies like yourselves and hopefully ourselves are trying to just piece by piece make it better and better and better for people's lives and just hopefully make it easier and easier for HR to work in that environment.
Yeah, and just, your point about HR was often seen as an admin function, probably reported into finance,
right.
That kind of thing. I think that we're starting to mature within HR, and you are right. There's a lot of newer companies where HR is being prioritized as one of the most important. The HR leader is absolutely one of the most important people in the business and is on the senior executive team and all that kind of thing. It's only really been, again, in the last 5 years or so, where HR has taken its seat at the table. And it's because it's a new discipline. When I started in my career nearly 21 years ago, HR was a very uncommon term. I'm not even sure if it was a term. It was, if a company had it was a personnel department that a company had. And that was very much about contracts, pay, reward, compliance. It was about making sure that if people were getting hired, they were hired in the right way. And if they were getting fired, they were getting fired in the right way. So there's been 20 years worth of maturity has happened pretty quickly.
Yeah, I was going to add on that as well. Just, I guess that part of it as well is when you've seen companies growing as fast as they have. So I think that the tech sector in particular, you mentioned like fintech as well, but like the entire tech sector in the UK and around Europe has been growing so fast recently that people have kind of had to grow up and start respecting this job a lot more.
Yeah.
Because first of all, it started becoming like we need to get the people through the door in the first place.
Yeah.
But that becomes critical. Like you look at every investor deck, and they always talk about like one of the most important parts is the team. Who's in the team? How did you attract them? So suddenly people became way more focused on we need to have a professional function that's going to be dedicated to that.
Yeah.
And so like, if you actually look at like some of the work that goes in on the recruitment side, it is scary, the numbers. I think we did a big number crunch, obviously using Personio to do it. I think that we did 8,000 interviews last year in total, like for us to hire, I think it's about 150 people at Personio.
Wow.
So like when you think about the time and effort that you're investing, like 8,000 interviews to try and actually get those people over the line, exactly to your point earlier on, when you start talking about what can be automated here, like how do you actually know that the channels you're using are being effective? How do you actually try and, as much as possible, limit the amount of time so you have good conversion rates between the amount of people who are interviewing, the amount of people who are getting hired? It becomes so critical to the success of the business. And like, this is not small amount of time you're talking about. This is like huge amounts of capacity that the organization is spending just trying to get the right people into the company in the first place.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, a company like yours that's growing really fast, I can see, I mean, 8,000 interviews for 150 hires sounds like a lot. But to be honest, there's probably a lot of people who look good on paper, and your company is probably in a good position as a buyer of talent. I mean, I'm sure competing heavily in areas like sales and software engineers, but I think there's probably quite a lot of people who also will want to come and work at Personio. So I think a lot of that kind of meeting in person is something that is going to be really vital. But a lot of those people, yeah, that's right, Alex, 8,000 to 150.
Yeah.
So, but there's the thing is, a lot of those 8,000 people, they might not have got that one job, but actually they might well have been good if there was 2 jobs getting hired at that point. So they may well have been. So keeping in touch with, I mean, some of those people you might never want to talk to ever again, but some of those people you could well be good with just a little more experience, or perhaps another job opening up, and they might be the absolute right person for that. So keeping in contact with those individuals is something that I think's been done pretty badly overall within recruitment.
Completely, yeah. I couldn't agree more. It's especially when you think how fast some people get in the interview process. I think we have like a 7-stage interview process. Now you could get someone who gets 5 or 6 stages down the interview process where most people think they're a good fit, then for one reason or another, it just they don't quite get over the line. It doesn't mean that they're a terrible person. It doesn't mean they're not potentially good, as you said, for another part in the company. Yeah. So using like talent pools and trying to keep them warm is so powerful. Like, especially when you start looking at Candidate.ID, like that's exactly where you guys can offer so much value, I think. Like the idea of how do you streamline this as much as possible? Like, do you literally get to a situation where of those 8,000, I think it was actually about 4,000 candidates and about 8,000 interviews. If you're talking about 4,000 candidates to hire 150, what happens to the other 3,850? Like, do you literally just say goodbye to them and you just don't even talk to them ever again?
Yeah.
And that's again when we start talking about the professionalism within HR. You talk about recruiters and how important now things like the employer brand are. Like, you got 3,850 people walking away with a bitter taste in their mouth. That's really damaging. That will make people not want to come and work for your company in the first place. Yeah. So like, if they are unsuccessful, how do you kind of like, first of all, make sure that as much as possible you can get a really nice process for them, ideally. You can make sure there's real transparency. You can make sure there's feedback at every stage. And then if they are unsuccessful, do exactly as you said, keep them warm. How do you keep them engaged for future opportunities? It's just going to make your life so much easier further down the line as a recruiter.
Yeah. Let's go on to some of the other areas that I'm not so familiar with, because I want to know what the issue is and what the automation opportunity is.
Yeah.
So let's talk about contracts. I mean, in particular, just on the recruitment bit, because the reason I'm going to move past the recruitment bit is because this is like literally everything can be automated in recruitment. So one of the RPO businesses, Pontoon Solutions, actually has a service called Pontoon X or something like that, which is basically recruiterless. Well, it is recruiterless.
Wow.
End to end, from top of the funnel right through to hiring. A human does not actually play a part in it. I think that was for Amazon that they launched it last year, and they've got some other customers using that now. I mean, there are humans involved, but they're basically robot managers. Wow. Rather than actually, they're not doing anything face-to-face interviewing or anything like that. So that could, the solutions for everything in recruitment. But moving on to the more HR-y type stuff. So contracts, I mean, how have companies been issuing contracts up until now, and how can that be automated?
Yeah, we can probably kind of like almost do it in a life cycle almost. So if you actually think, even if we start on the recruitment and you almost like transition into an employee, even the offering of that contract in the first place there, it sounds the most simple thing. I was talking to a friend recently who's working in recruitment. He said that he managed the most amazing process with this candidate, really senior person, got them to the final stage. Candidate was delighted, company was delighted. It took him 2 weeks to get the contract offer out. It blew my mind. It really blew my mind. I just couldn't believe that someone would spend 2 weeks trying to get a contract offer out to someone so senior. And the reality was there's this really sort of like convoluted process, and certain people had to approve it and everyone else had to do something else. And then finally this document came out. And I think in the end, it actually managed to still get the candidate over the line. But the reality is the amount of good candidates who, even when you're talking about how hard it is to hire in the first place, when you do get someone to that point, being able to actually issue the contract should be the fun part of a recruiter's job. That should be the bit that they have to do so much of the tough part of the job. Giving someone the good news and saying, hey, look, come and work with us should be the really, really happy bit. And having to wait 2 weeks in that process just really scared me, really, to be honest with you, when you think about like that employee experience.
That's the danger zone, isn't it? The danger zone is the person's been offered a job. You can't get them like to sign on the dotted line for 2 weeks. Right. You can't even give them what they need to evaluate the opportunity for 2 weeks. They're probably talking to other businesses at the same time.
I was going to say the exact same. If you think that they're only talking to your company, like, you're probably kidding yourself. Like, it just makes good business sense to talk to a couple of different opportunities and see what one makes most sense for you. So the idea that you can literally have a contract stored in Personio and in 2 clicks send a contract out to somebody, you're talking about just saving so much admin. And you think a contract, 98% of it is exactly the same, right? From employee to employee. Like, obviously the numbers that change will be like, salary number might change, the hire date may change, lucky enough to have share options, something like that might change. There may be some things on benefits. The vast majority of a contract is just print and repeat. So being able to just issue it and having it sent out in a few seconds, just first of all, it just kind of tries to eliminate as much as you were talking about before, the danger zone. Just remove the danger zone from your life. Don't let you have to be in the danger zone. Make it so it's smooth. Make it so it's easy. And that candidate, how do they make them feel? It's like, wow, this company's got their game together. Like, I interviewed them, within 24 hours, I got feedback. And then straight after the feedback, I had a contract hit my inbox within about 5 minutes. Like, this is great. This is somebody who has a smooth operation. They clearly value me. They clearly want me. They care about me. Not, I interviewed, they said they're going to send me a contract. It's been 2 weeks. I still haven't heard anything. Are they still interested? Do I turn up for work in 2 weeks? Should I look at other opportunities? Like, there's so much, as you said, in the danger zone. Just a simple step of automation can save so much time, but also the impact it can have on the company of getting that key hire, that key critical hire into your organization is massive when you actually start about it.
Yeah, I agree. So once they've signed that contract, I think that the danger zone goes from red to probably amber.
Right.
But that person is not in place yet. The job's not done until they've started. In fact, there's probably even in their employment, I understand the first 3 months is still danger zone. But let's talk about that middle bit. So this is the onboarding. What are companies doing wrong, and what can they be doing better, and how could you automate this? The whole onboarding experience, because this is part of the whole experience.
Completely, yeah. It's a really interesting segment. I think it often gets lost in no man's land. Where it's almost like a bit between recruitment and then HR. Then there's this one little area where some companies HR do it, some companies recruitment are still involved. If you're lucky, sometimes there's one person who's dedicated to it. But for so many people, that transition is brutal. It's really not a nice experience. And now people are actually even start using terms like pre-boarding, right? Which is like before they've even started onboarding, what the company doing to try and get them through. And again, I'm going to use our own personal experience here. Our onboarding process is over 50 different steps, and it impacts 5 different departments in order to make sure you've got everything right. And that'll be everything from making sure the laptop's there, making sure the person's accounts are there, making sure that there's a hoodie on their desk on the first day, making sure that the rest of the team know that they're going to be joining, making sure that trainings are scheduled. Like, there's so much that goes into it. And if you're a really small team of like 10 people,
Yeah.
you probably get away with just like shouting and saying, hey, can you make sure this is happening? But if you're trying to hire, say, 10 people a month,
Yeah.
like 5 people a month,
Yeah.
this is so hard to keep all of this information in one person's head.
Yeah.
And this is where it's funny you picked up your notebook earlier on. I talked to a lot of people, they're doing exactly the same. It gets to the onboarding piece, and it's normally all of the information just stored in one person's head. Like, it's in their head, and they might have scribbled it down. Maybe they've got an Excel list, but so much of it is stored in their head. So the idea that you could actually have like a system just to really quickly make sure that everyone's aware of like what needs to happen, when does it need to happen, who's in charge of this, has it been completed, is there reminders being sent out that if this hasn't been completed, it needs to be completed by this date, just leads to a really smooth process. So when someone does start, they actually feel really welcome. And like, I'm going to give a couple of examples here, but first of all, changing jobs is stressful.
Yeah.
It's actually quite emotional, I find. You know, like you're going from somewhere where you feel comfortable to somewhere where you feel uncomfortable. So trying to make as much as possible, it's just like a really smooth transition, makes a really, really big difference. I always remember in a previous company, turning up on my first day and there was no computer. And I had to actually go to PC World. I had to get a bus to PC World, Adam, which was my onboarding experience. And I had to buy a computer, go back, then try and set up the computer on my first day.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, does this company actually expect me to be here? Like, how organized were they? How much did they actually know that I was going to be here? How much care have they put into making sure that I feel a part of the company? And it doesn't really give a great impression, really. So, making that piece really right has such a big impact.
So it sounds like, there's 50 different steps. Let's take onboarding at Personio. There's 50 different steps. That sounds like, for the candidate, it sounds like, God, that's a lot of things to do. But of course, it's not them that's doing it.
Right.
It is a lot of attention to detail within the organization. So I'm guessing a lot of those 50 steps can be automated, so that actually once the candidates, they've signed the contract, that then triggers 30 of those 50 steps automatically then happen digitally somehow.
Exactly. So if there's anything that needs to be automated, it automatically happens. If anyone needs to be aware of something they manually need to do, they're aware that they need to manually do it. But it's just, instead of it being stored in one person's head, everything just happens at the click of a button.
Yeah.
Press accept, and everyone just knows what their role is and what they need to do.
Yeah.
Just when you talk to people about it, you can always see the pressure just release off their shoulders. That you don't have to do this anymore. There's an easier way to do it, which makes people's lives so much easier just to really nail that stuff.
I'm gonna say, so you talked about going to PC World.
Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, when our company, like, I remember before our company was a technology business, about, I don't know, 5-6 years ago, we did have 6 or 8 people started all on the one day, and we did make it part of the onboarding day, which was they built their own desk, and so we did actually do that. But we didn't make it. We didn't make it out as if it was like, they were not cared for because of this. We actually suggested that this was, really just part of a fun experience for them, of like literally setting up the company, and it was the way that we positioned it. We simply hadn't had time, but anyway, I totally get your point. Let's talk about two other aspects of it. One is around like all the sort of personal human bits, like holidays and medical and payroll and all that sort of thing. I guess that a lot of like medium-sized organizations are not doing this very well today. I'm guessing that it's difficult for people to access their data and things like that.
Yeah, it kind of varies from company to company. I think that there is some automation in tech here. I think that most people normally have like an absence management tool or something to try and help them. Yeah. We do still talk to some people who are still tracking stuff on spreadsheets, which feels particularly brutal.
Yeah.
But there's normally some capture of information. The bit that normally is slightly concerning is when you think about personal information, like people's digital personal information.
Yeah.
Because you're normally not talking about something like, I don't know, their dog's name or something like that. It's not something menial. You're talking about some pretty personal stuff. You're talking about like their address, their bank details.
Yeah.
You're talking about their next of kin. Like this is stuff that's pretty actually important. This stuff, you don't really want it knocking around on an Excel sheet that anyone in the company can access.
Yeah.
You don't want it even in a place where if it is on an Excel sheet, if it gets deleted by mistake, you've lost so much information there.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can actually store it in a place where everything's really secure, everything's completely like GDPR compliant, of course, because it has to be right now. But then also,
especially for good for a German company though. You buy from a German company, you know that that's nailed, don't you?
It's so funny when you talk to people about it. In Germany, it's like the first thing that everyone always asks. It's like, how GDPR compliant are you?
Yeah.
It's interesting in the role, like there's different regions that are a lot less strict about GDPR compliancy, I think, than others. But Germany's definitely like about as far as you can get in terms of an extreme, in terms of being interested into it.
Yeah.
Even once it's there, it's just like, how do you access it? How do you get access to my information if I want to change something? Does anyone update it? Like, how easy is it to do it? Like all of this stuff, you want to be able to have like different levels of visibility. Like, can a manager see some of this stuff? Can they see everything? Do you want to have certain levels that people can see different parts of this profile? Like, you want to try and customize this for your business, because the big thing I find is every business operates differently. Yeah. There's a lot of companies who end up having to operate because that's how their system tells them they should operate. Whereas I'm a big believer in like allowing pure customization, so that a tool should customize for different companies' workflows rather than a company having to be compromising for a tool to make it work on their end.
Yeah. The sort of last thing I wanted to focus on was around the concept of like everything in one place. So you've got within recruitment tech, or within HR tech, sorry, you have, there's two ways a company could do things. The first is they could go and buy a system like a Personio, which does a lot of what they need, or they can go and buy, you know, lots of sort of point solutions and kind of put them all together on some kind of platform, or have them talk through APIs and that type of thing. I'm guessing that in the sort of faster growing mid-sized businesses that you work with, they probably want a lot of things within the one system. Is this the trend, and what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, I'd probably say there's no right here. I think that having everything in one system, I'm probably biased. I definitely think that it makes sense to do it in one system. A quick example I was going to say is we actually started looking at where the drop-off was in our recruiting process when we were looking at trying to hire engineers. And a big drop-off happened when it got to the coding challenge. Yeah. And loads of people dropped off if they didn't complete it, or they didn't pass it. So we saw a huge drop. Then we started comparing what was the performance like of the people correlated with how well they performed at the coding test, the ones who did get the job. Yeah. And when you have everything in one tool, you can start running these reports, right? So you can start looking at it and saying, there's actually almost zero correlation between how well they performed in the job once they got the job and how well we perceive they would be from the coding challenge.
Yeah.
But then you can start actually doing some really cool and interesting stuff from a HR perspective about going, we need to revamp this coding test. Yeah. It doesn't make any sense to have this coding test. It doesn't correlate to performance, and we're losing so many applicants. Here's the data we need to say we need to change something. So having everything in one tool does make sense. But to go back to the previous point, like we also understand that some companies love their ATS. Yep. Like you talk to some companies, they're really embedded in it. They really, really love it.
Yep.
And we're not going to be the company that says you have to rip out everything to put Personio in.
Yep.
So we refer to ourselves as the HR operating system.
Yep.
We almost want it to be like the motherboard where you have all the core data in one place.
Yeah.
And then if you want to keep your ATS, we've got the open APIs, we've got the integrations, so you can plug it in. If you want to use an engagement survey, you can use the data again from Personio to create a profile straight away. You can plug it straight in.
Yeah.
If people are really married to other different tools, we are completely open to the idea that they can use it. But obviously, from a slightly biased perspective, I think you can do some really cool stuff when you do have everything in one place.
Yeah, yeah. Great. Ben, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time to join me to talk about some of these things today. We're going to be, Siobhan, who works with me, is going to chop this discussion. It's like a sort of informal conversation about HR automation. So we're gonna chop a lot of this up into smaller segments and then get that shared. Let me just quickly comment on this. So oh, okay. So Sid has just made a comment, which is, I feel that both Personio and Candidate.ID are fantastic and scalable products, and smart use of data definitely makes our organization more strategic. However, in this ever-changing canvas of skill set and the nature of work, do you think it is time to bring in processes, especially for SMBs, which would enable passionate and equally capable candidates to adapt new skills or jobs of their liking?
What are your thoughts on that one, Adam? That's a tricky one.
Well, the answer is absolutely yes. I think it's vital that organizations are doing that. But I think that SMBs have got to. They really have to get up to speed if they want to compete, because they can't keep relying on spreadsheets to manage people data. And we're also it's more and more important that they've got a sense of who they should be interacting with when, because the workforce is much more transient than it ever has been. People are moving jobs every 2.5 years now, which is like less time in job than people have ever been in the past. Skill sets, there's a lot more requirement for ephemeral, relationships with people for specific periods of time where they can come in and work on things. There is some trend towards people wanting to work contracts more than they have in the past, although of course the challenges, IR35 and other challenges to that. But the workforce is definitely more difficult to visualize than it ever has been, and therefore there's more need for technologies that help you create transparency on that.
Completely, yeah. I couldn't agree more. Like, it's one of the things that I'm a big advocate of as well, is like, even once you've hired someone, like internally moving them around. In my last company, we used to have so many people who changed. Like, our recruiter used to be a salesperson. One of our product managers used to be working in sales. Everyone used to move around from job to job. And like, when you start looking, exactly as the question says, it's almost like there's slightly more, what's the skill set that made them good at that job in the first place? Yeah. So much of it can be transferable into different parts of the organization.
Yeah.
I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah.
I think my approach is normally, before you even start looking externally, look internally. Or if you do, like, even look at the candidates you've currently got, like, what are the skills they've got that can make them adapt into this new role, even if they don't see that they're the right fit right now. And I actually think it can be a competitive advantage for a lot of SMBs,
yes.
Like really hiring people who can be a bit more fluid, as you said, within an organization, rather than being like a very specific, I do this one piece of the jigsaw very, 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 very well.
Yeah.
Because the people who are slightly more broader skill sets can bring lots of different opinions from different, like they can take a product opinion to a sales problem. They can take a marketing opinion to a technical problem.
Yeah.
They can see things from a very, very broad light, which actually gives a new voice that probably isn't being heard in the teams already. So I'm a huge believer in, exactly as the question says, enabling passionate people to adapt to new skills or jobs as they see fit.
Yep, absolutely. Ben, where can people get you? How do they make contact with you?
Yeah, so I've got a really confusing last name, which is Kiziltug, so Kiziltug. You can get me on LinkedIn. I'm always there. You can also find me, or if you go to Personio.com, you can find plenty of contact information there. I'm also on Twitter occasionally as well, but probably not as aggressively. So probably LinkedIn or just directly through Personio.com is probably the best way to get in contact.
Yeah. Great. Ben, thanks so much for your time. Good to see you.
Great stuff. Thanks for your time, Adam. Cheers. Have a good one. Bye.